Okay. Hey guys, welcome back to the Ultimate Goosebumps Man channel, and I have a very exciting video for you guys today. I have a very special guest, Goosebumps Aussie fan. It's so such an honor to have you on the channel, man. It's so cool to be talking to you. I've been watching your channel for so long now, so the fact that I get to just talk to you in person is also just great.
Oh wow. Thank you so much for having you on, man. I'm actually a fan of your channels too. Like I've been watching man, it's kind of crazy to me because like when I look back at when I started and I see now how many Goosebumps YouTubers there actually are. And yeah, no, I just enjoy going through all your guys' videos, and I'm a big fan of you, man. Like I love your content, what you do, and hey, it's just sharing the love of Goosebumps, which is what we're here for, man. Like this community is everything I live for, and yeah, it's this undying passion that I have for this franchise, that we all do. And, that's why we're here, man, to
Yeah.
just discuss Bumps and everything about it. So yeah, thank you for letting me be a part of your channel and coming on to do this. I'm really excited. Let's
Yeah.
talk Goosebumps.
Okay. So our topic for today's video is going to be kind of centering around kind of the 2023 show and basically talking about our ideas for what we would have liked to see in a serialized Goosebumps show and our ideas for what books to adapt, what the overarching story would be, just all that kind of stuff. So I kind of want Bjorn to go first because he's the guest. So
All right. Well, look, the 2023 show. So we've kind of covered it, but like, I mean, there's still a few things that nitpick at me. Look, overall, it got a pass from me. When I saw the first 5 episodes, I didn't really know what to think, to be completely honest with you. I was obviously disappointed. Not so much in the like final few episodes though. Like I actually really enjoyed like the 4th episode, the 5th episode, and of course we only got the first 5 episodes to begin with. But then I kind of went back and watched it again, and overall I enjoyed it. But I think what really helped carry the show was, you got Justin Long, Rachel Harris. I think they were just fantastic. I love the relationship between Nora and her son Lucas. I think it's an absolutely beautiful how they've written their characters, and I feel like they spent a lot of time together when making this show because they have some really nice emotional moments, like mother and son. I think it's just really wonderful. And Justin Long plays this goofy, weird guy that's being possessed by a ghost, and I gotta say, the episode where he's like waking up and he thinks he's like hungover and he's just like, doing all that. I think he just played that off so well, man. Like, because I mean, think about it. You're being possessed, you're in someone else's body and you got to get used to these legs and this body. And I think they did that really well. But I think my issue with the show definitely is the story. Like, I don't really care about the whole love story relationship Gen Z plot that they were going with. Even just the soundtrack, like there was a couple songs in there I like, because look, I'm a Billie Eilish fan. They did play one of her songs, so I must admit I was like, okay, there's a Billie Eilish song in there. But I feel like they were just playing the soundtrack from like the 2023 top 50, 100 or whatever you want to call it. So yeah, the overall story I didn't really care for. I feel like it was sort of, because the show's called Goosebumps, and I feel like it was taking over from what was most important about the show, which was the Goosebump monsters and the stories within. Like, so you're gonna say Cheese and Die, The Haunted Mask, you've got Go Eat Worms, Kick Lock of Doom, Night Living Dummy. Those were kind of the central focused, Goosebump monsters, even though it didn't feel like they were the central focus. I felt like for the majority of the show, we were focusing more on these kids and their relationships, and as opposed to the actual essence of Goosebumps within the show. So I was, a little disappointed with the story. Look, we all would have wanted an anthology series, but I just knew we weren't going to get that. I just feel like it's something that they don't really do anymore. But yeah, don't get me wrong. There were some great episodes in the series, like episodes 4, 5, and 6. I think those 3 episodes together were great. And then it kind of dropped down again. But then episode 8, I think, was a pretty good episode as well. It felt more like a finale than episode 10 did, with Harold you know, his ghost being reunited with his parents and everything, throwing Slappy off a cliff. I was like, okay, well, this feels like the end to me. So the last 2 episodes just felt like kind of an add-on to set up something for season 2. So yeah, that was a little disappointing in that regard. I don't really want to talk too much spoilers because I know some people haven't even seen the finale yet. Because I did a video recently where I was talking about the finale, and everyone's like, "We haven't seen it yet. What are you doing?" I'm like, "Oh, sorry. I thought Goosebumps fans would have like jumped at the opportunity to watch it straight away, like I did." But I will admit, the overall thing I enjoyed the most about the show was definitely Slappy. I think he was great. You know, I mean, British Slappy. I mean, come on, like it's different. You know, it's fresh. Like the show got certified fresh on Rotten Tomato, and I mean, technically, it is a fresh take on Goosebumps. But I guess because we're comparing it to the original source material that we know and love, it's, you know, that's how we're basing it off Goosebumps itself, what we know. And I guess it's just hard for us to accept the new kind of stuff, you know, but for the new audience, they're probably enjoying it, you know. And I feel like most of the good reviews that have been coming in, like the positive feedback, has been from like this new generation, like Gen Z, you know, they're loving the show. They probably have never even picked up a Goosebump book, half of them. But yeah, I mean, I would have done things a lot different. For instance, I always had this really cool idea if we had a Goosebumps series set at a summer camp. The whole series is set at a summer camp. And I have a little selection here of which monsters I would like to appear in my story. So I guess I would have a group of kids, you know, like in the books, go into a summer camp, and the counselors are acting weird as typical. And of course, though, we have to include a bunch of different Goosebump monsters. So I have gone ahead, and straight away I'm going to start with Slappy, because look, what's Slappy got to do with the summer camp? Nothing, but what's it got to do with Goosebumps? Everything. And I feel like the fan base, it's just so heavily focused on Slappy, and so many of the kids love him. And, you know, I just feel like you can't have a Goosebumps show without Slappy. So somehow Slappy would come into it. I don't know in what capacity, but I feel like he would be somehow pulling the strings. But in terms of the monsters, like for the summer camp vibe, I'm going with all of them. So we're going to start with Ghost Camp. I think this was such a great Goosebump book. I recently actually read it for the first time in like 10 years. Actually, when I went on a plane to a different state. And I forgot how creepy this book actually is. Like the whole, you know, the wind picking up, and it like picks up the kids, and then like, you know, there's like the goo that's at the foot of the bed and they don't know what that is. Like, I just think there's a lot of creepy elements to this book that could really go well in a show. But yeah, I've kind of just gone and taken the liberty of picked all the different sort of summer camp vibe books. Curse of Camp Cold Lake. I would just somehow incorporate all those into the story. I haven't really got it, you know, worked out right now, but I would do a summer camp Goosebumps story. I think that would be really, really fun. And of course, but I do have one little thing that I've managed to work out pretty quickly. The finale of this episode, I don't know how the blob comes into it, but I would love to see a King Jelly Jam verse the blob as the finale of this somehow. I don't know how it happens, but they get in each other's way. Let's put it that way. And yeah, there's a big fight. So I don't know. That's kind of where I would go with it. I think that would be a really cool setting, because there's just so many different summer camp related Goosebump books, and I don't know, I just get that vibe, that feel from, you know, when I read those books. So I would have Sabers on the loose, you know, he's roaming around. You know, I'd have Uncle Al. I'd have all the minor characters in too, like the human characters too. Like I'd have Larry be the dick counselor, for instance. Like, you know what I mean? But that's what I would do. I wouldn't be going this full love triangle plot that they went with the new show. I think it was a bit ridiculous, but then again, that's just today's demographic, and you know, it's what kids are into, like, you know. But for me personally, yes, I would have definitely gone more a Goosebumps sort of feel, vibe, route, you know, focus story, like maybe at a summer camp or at an amusement park. Because I mean, then you could just do that. Literally, you could make a season just based on One Day at Horrorland. You wouldn't need anything else. But yeah, man, that's basically me. Summer camp.
Hmm.
That's my Goosebumps show.
Okay, so I had a couple ideas. One of them, which I was actually kind of talking to a few of like BD horror and Goosebumps completionists about last night, kind of bouncing off ideas, and I've kind of taken some of their ideas and kind of adapted it into this. And full credit to those ideas, obviously go to them. But one of my initial concepts was kind of do something similar to the movies where Stein exists in the universe. And in this universe, have it where Stein has recently passed by some mysterious circumstances, and all of his like nephews and nieces, like siblings and cousins, would be the main characters. So it's more of a family dynamic versus the friends dynamic that we always get. They all go to his house as like, because obviously no one's a family member passes away, you usually go to their place and sort out their stuff and kind of divide it between people. And all of these siblings, because they were relatives of Stein, grew up reading Goosebumps. They were big fans of it. And when they go to Stein's house to start, to organize the stuff, they discover a journal, and also they discover a bunch of different Goosebumps items, kind of like what the new show did with the camera, the mask. I'm trying to think of the mirror, because I have Let's Get Invisible as one of my ideas. A scarecrow, things like a can of Monster Blood, things like that. That Stein just kind of had laying around his house as like memorabilia, or just something that was like made for him by a fan. And in the middle, kind of borrowing from the second draft script of the movie, Slappy is in a display case in the middle of the office. And basically, they discover this journal, and in this journal, it's written a bunch of like cryptic things talking about each monster kind of, and Stein hinting towards something is after him and something is causing bad things to happen to him, revolving around these Goosebumps creatures. And then, kind of similar to this new show, the characters go back to their own respective homes, and they find when they get there that one of the objects that they've interacted with in Stein's house has somehow appeared in their house. And then each of them kind of have to, again, kind of go through their own story. So like one of the relatives, we can kind of take this takes place around Halloween time. One of the girls is like into scaring people. She works in like a haunted house attraction, and she gets the haunted mask. And so she uses that to scare in the house. And then that whole episode's kind of centered around there, and the mask kind of, again, warping her and making her more evil. And she gets more violent with the people she's scaring and with her coworkers. And, with like Let's Get Invisible, you could do kind of a similar thing to what they did with Cuckoo Clock and Doom in the new show, where the main character gets trapped in the mirror and his clone comes out, and like maybe adapt a little bit more where the clones have the ability to go to other mirrors and pull another clone out of the mirror, and just kind of have this like whole clone army they have to fight against.
Yeah.
Then
I
was thinking for Seiji's and Dai is pretty commonplace, like a lot of similar stuff that happens in the book and stuff. There wasn't really much you need to do there. It's pretty straightforward. And then another one I was thinking was Scarecrow Walks at Midnight, where basically one of the characters lives on a farm with her family, and when she arrives there's a scarecrow out in the cornfield that was from Stein's house. And then kind of like in the book, the scarecrows start multiplying, and then by the climax they all start like converging in on the house, and they have to figure out a way to deal with it. And then I've already mentioned Haunted Mask. Then Monster Blood. Like for Monster Blood, I was thinking we could do like almost like what they did with the 1988 Blob remake, like where it's like, again, like a more intensified, because this book is very goofy and silly. So I feel like if they intensified it with the Monster Blood and added bigger stakes and made it more aggressive and actually like deadly, that'd be kind of an interesting way of doing it. Maybe even get a little cameo from Cuddles or something like that. And of course, you gotta have Night of the Living Dummy. And my idea for this one was that maybe this is centering around Stein's a grandchild of Stein, either a grandson, granddaughter, and their father was a Stein's son, obviously. And so their father was big into ventriloquist dummies because of the book. And so he ended up buying a replica, like a dummy that looked very similar to Mr. Wood, that's up in the attic of their house. And when this kid arrives home after Stein's house, Slappy is there, and some mysterious force and this person kind of pulling the strings reads the spell and brings both Slappy and Mr. Wood to life, and the character has to deal with both of those, and they kind of have to use their knowledge of Goosebumps books to try and defeat these monsters.
Oh, so your story's like center around, yeah, like if Stein was actually a part of this universe, and it's the Goosebump books are in this universe, kind of
Mhm.
like the movie.
Yeah.
Like, my story was more, well, my kind of idea is more just along the lines of like these kids go to a summer camp and there's just Goosebump monsters.
Hmm.
Like they're basically just in this story. But I guess, yeah, for mine, I would have to try and work out how they got there, why are they there, because
Hmm.
that's the part of the story I haven't really worked out. I guess I would have to have Stein in my universe as well. Like it would have to be that the Goosebump books exist, but it would probably be like Haunted Halloween style, where there's like the one book that brings Halloween alive. There's like the one book. So maybe there's like a group of kids, they go to this summer camp and they go to the Forbidden Bunk is there. They go to the Forbidden Bunk. Basically, the counselors are telling them, do not go there no matter what you do, don't go there. And then they could say, oh, this like young writer used to live there. And then one day the kids, being kids, they go into this cabin and, they're looking around and they find this like little trap door and they go, oh, what's this? Hey, there's something down here. And there's a trunk down there. And inside the trunk, I guess you could have Slappy in there. And and on the top of the trunk, it could say R.L. Stein. But then when they open it, so kind of like, I wouldn't say like the briefcase, like in the original Goosebumps intro, but like similar style where it's like black and you got the gold writing on it. And
Hmm.
inside the trunk, Slappy, on his lap, he's got a book. And it could be a manuscript that says something like, I don't know, it could just say, Welcome to Camp Nightmare. Just use that Goosebumps book title. But Camp Nightmare could just refer to all the different Goosebumps books to do with camp.
Hmm.
And once they open that, that's when everything is unleashed onto the town. So onto the camp. And then you'd have, see, when I think of Goosebumps Unleashed, it's always onto the town of Greendale, Maryland, onto the town of Port Lawrence. It's always onto the town. But for my story, it's just summer camp. And basically, once this book is like released, these kids enter like almost like this realm of like hell where they can't leave. If they try to get to the outskirts, they can't get through. It's like everything's blocked off. They're cut off from the outside world. And basically everything around them just shapes. So all the elements from the different books are there. So basically all the ghost kids start appearing. Saber appears out of the woods. You have King Jelly Jam in the basement. And you know what I mean? Like that's probably how I would do my story, because I feel like that'd be different. Like it'd be different from what we've had with the Goosebump movies from the series. Like I feel like in the movies, I can't even remember, was there any camp Goosebumps related monsters in the movies? They weren't, were there? And I don't know why they didn't want to put Saber, or I mean, I guess because they got the Whale Fever Swamp, like why put Saber in it? But yeah, there wasn't really anything from any of the camp books.
Well, like the thing is, like it seemed like the movies they focused strictly on the monsters that they could use CG for. It's because it's cheaper. Like all
Yeah.
the practical monsters take the back burner, except for like the ghouls. But like, especially when you look at behind the scenes photos, all the practical effects for the monsters look so good. Like the creeps, the scarecrow, the jack-o'-lanterns, they all look so good. And like they're so underused. And like the haunted mask, the most iconic Goosebumps creature of all time after Slappy, gets like 2 seconds of screen time in the background.
Oh, you know what I would have done for the Haunted Mask? You know the scene where like Murder the Clown goes up to the window and he's like, he
Mhm.
looks in and then he looks off? I would have like at the very least, I would have got the Haunted Mask to do that, like looking in, like just to have a close up,
Yeah.
because there wasn't a single close up in the whole movie, and I'm like, this is just ridiculous. I would have personally had that the mask is floating around
Mhm.
and he latches on to one of the kids.
Yeah,
That's
that
what I
would
would
have
have.
been. Like
I would,
surprised.
she came out of the book as Carly Beth with the mask. I would have had no. The mask just came out, floating around like in the episode, and it latches on. You know what would have been an even really interesting twist? If it latched onto like Stein or something. Like, what if it latched onto Stein, like towards the end,
Yeah.
and then it starts taking over or something? Like, it's not like in the book where like it takes over and like it takes time. It just starts taking over like right away because it's trying to stop him. Do you know what I
Mhm.
mean? Like that would
Yeah.
have been a really cool thing, But
Yeah, and like the fact that
here we go.
yeah, and the fact that Haunted Halloween didn't use any kind of haunted mask or the jack-o'-lanterns or anything like that. Like, well, they had a jack-o'-lantern monster, but And I guess the ogre mask was kind of a reference to the haunted mask, but
Yeah, it was. And what I found really funny about that, how there was actually like that Goosebumps display that had like the masks on it, and I'm like, there hasn't been a Goosebumps display like that since the 90s. So I thought it was kind of funny how they're like, oh yeah, Goosebumps has always been popular enough to have its own like display in like a oh, what's the store called over Spirit Halloween, you know, or Trick or Treat Studios. Like, well, then again, Trick or Treat Studios is doing all the Goosebumps stuff,
yeah.
so they probably would have
It
a
was,
display.
yeah. It was kind of cool though, because I had a Spirit Halloween near my college campus, and when I went there, I actually found a Trick or Treat Studios haunted mask on the display.
Really?
Hmm.
Oh wow, that's so
I
cool.
wouldn't buy
I
it. I
feel
get
like,
the it was like $70, but
oh yeah, and I mean, like, do you know what the crazy thing is though? I feel like, you know, like the Scream mask, how it's so iconic. It's like even if you go to a cheapy store, they have like a cheap version of it. Like it's just such an iconic mask. I feel like the haunted mask was so iconic that it should be getting that same treatment where like it's just this like it's this mask you see every Halloween at like every store, even if it's like a cheap version of it. You should be able to. It should be accessible, but it's not. Like to think that a company like Trick or Treat Studios, the only company, are the ones that have done it. But apparently, the company Disguise that did the Slappy costume, and they also did the Goosebump costumes back in the 90s. They did a haunted mask, like from the book cover, but trying to find one has been near impossible. Even though
yeah,
I've been told by beautiful people that you could get it. You know, it's like the book version of haunted
yeah, I know.
mask.
I've seen pictures of it, but like, they're very scarce. Like, there's no videos on YouTube about it. There's very few pictures of people owning it. Like, it's just one of those
Yeah.
like it must have had like a very limited release or something like that.
Oh, it makes me wonder, like if it was, but man, yeah, I gotta admit, like crafting my own Goosebumps story, but I was trying to think of it like on the spot, and I'm like, how would I do this? Like, because there's so many ways that I could go about it, and I'm like, yeah, summer camp, that's the one. It would be just, it would literally, the opening scene would just be like kids on a bus, kind of like in Welcome to Camp Nightmare, where they're going to a summer camp. And then yeah, that's when they discover Slappy and a manuscript, and you know, kind of like the Goosebump movies, but mine would be better than the Goosebump movies. For instance, you'd be getting Tim Jacobus to do the movie poster or the TV show poster, and I get Jack Lenzon to do the soundtrack, and you know what I mean. Like I'd be going all out with my version of it. I mean, I don't know if you remember, but there was a second draft script of the Goosebump movie, and it was pretty awesome. It even had Cuddles in it.
Mm-hmm.
Cuddles was in it, and I'm like, God, and Cuddles was like pinning down the police officers, and I'm like, this is so cool. And Slappy was like
destroying Loren's garden. Like,
yeah,
you do so much stuff that's more book accurate, like actually reading the spell that brings Slappy to life and things like that. Like,
oh, what happened? And like, I love where like the executioner's like ringing the bell, you know, and then like they see the big shadow, and it slowly gets smaller because it's Slappy. I'm like, this is so cool. What happened to this movie?
I feel like Sony saw that script and saw how dark it was and kind of got cold feet because they wanted to make it more kid friendly. So they
ditched a lot of the cool ideas, in my opinion. Like Cuddles the hamster, like being in it, because technically, if you've got Cuddles, you've got Monster Blood. Because you could have just had Monster Blood drooling from his mouth, you know, like. Because I mean, they kind of walk hand in hand. Like if you're gonna have Monster Blood, I would expect them to put Cuddles in there, because I'd be just disappointed if they didn't. Like, you gotta have the two together, sort of thing. I don't even know why, but I added Cuddles to my story somewhere. I don't know where he'd fit in, but somewhere along the way. I mean, it could even be King Jellyjam versus Cuddles as the climax, but I thought it would be more fitting if it was the Blob versus King Jellyjam. And then they both die together because of the smell. There you go. Because of the smell of King Jellyjam, they both just they die like.
But yeah, my idea also for the climax episode of my show, like the season finale, Welcome to Dead House. Like, basically have the entity that's been controlling all the objects and bringing these things to life and haunting all these kids. These family all go back to Stein's house because they obviously realize that it's kind of centered around this place because this is where they got all the items. And there's a cemetery nearby, and this entity that's causing it, which BD Horror had a fun idea for it, and says a funnel nod, have it be the man in black with the briefcase from the Goosebumps intro. And have him be like, threat.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah. What?
and
Oh man.
and then like basically he like
Create.
resurrects the dead from the graveyard, and they kind of started infecting the rest of the neighborhood, and they all just start like converging on these kids and trying to take them out to like, because basically the kids are trying to stop this entity, obviously through the information they learn in Stein's journal. And so obviously he's trying to stop them. So he's like having these hordes of these zombies converging on the house and kind of turning it into Dead House.
Wow. That would be really cool. And your story idea is actually way better than mine. But you already had yours all pre-worked out. I was just like, which books do I put into mine? But yeah, like that's so cool. But like that's the thing. Each season could be centered on a different thing. So like, see, for instance, at the end of my show, one of the kids could discover Horrorland manuscript. You know what I mean? And then you just know, okay, season 2 is going to be Horrorland, and you could make an entire season off that. Entire season. It's just there's so many avenues. Like when you look at, for instance, like remember the Escape from Horrorland game with Jeff Goldblum, and Steven Spielberg was a part of that. DreamWorks made it. I'm like, when you actually look at that, you could make an entire series. You know what I mean? And I just feel like, yeah, what this show couldn't do, what Goosebump fans could have. It's really sad to think about, because I just think what made them go this route. And I mean, I kind of see why they did, because it's very 2023. It's very Gen Z. This is what the kids today would like to watch. You can throw some Goosebumps in there, but remember, the focus is the kids and their stories. Like, but the title's called Goosebumps. Like,
Right.
So it should be Goosebumps as the focus, and their love triangle relationships with the parents, whatever, should be on the back burner. I just don't understand why it was brought into the foreground like that. I think, yeah, they had a lot to, work with, and they just kind of failed a little bit. But in some aspects, I was cheering. Don't get me wrong, but yeah, the bad outshined the good, unfortunately, and a little sad. I do have to ask you one thing: do you collect the first edition Goosebump books?
Not really. I'm not really big on that. I just kind of want to get my hands on all original 62. Like, that's my goal right now. I have like 14 left, and like.
I'll leave you with a little fun thing before we end the video. Okay, I've been going through all my books, like every single one of them, right? All of them. And basically, I've been going through them to check if I have first editions. Because look, I've been collecting for 23 years, and generally, I just buy them when I see them with the original covers, and I've never really thought about whether or not, hey, is that a first print? Or is that like a second or a third or a 10th, 20th? I never really thought about that until maybe like the last 6 months, and only just recently, because I have so many books, so I just kept looking at what I had and going, I can't be bothered going through all those and trying to like check every single book for the first editions. And then I just finally decided about a week ago, you know what, I'm going to do it, and I'm going to start with Night Living Dummy, because that's the book I have the most copies of. I have like 30 something copies of this book, right? So I went through them all. I'm getting to about halfway, and I'm like, I still haven't seen a number one, because obviously a first edition is when the number counts down to 1. So when this number counts down to 1, you got a first print, like first print, first wave when the book first came out. And I could be wrong about this. Someone might correct us down below, but I'm pretty sure someone mentioned something. They only did about 10,000 of like the first so many books until it took off. That's when they would have just done like 100,000 to start, or 200 or whatever it was. So this was one of the early ones, and I went through every copy and realized I had no first editions apart from maybe 3 that were Australian first editions. So like first prints in Australia. I bought a collection of stuff off a guy a few years ago, and he just said, oh, I've also got these books if you want them. And he just threw in his books. He said, oh, by the way, I was an old school Goosebump collector. I got the books from the Scholastic paper as they came out back in 92 to 93, you know. So every book he had was a first edition. So my one and only first edition of every copy I've ever found and bought is this one, and look at it. This destroyed book, which only the cover, because believe it or not, it's still, you can read it no problem. And I think, man, for someone that has 30-something copies of this book and only has one first edition in that condition, it's like, it's just absolutely depressing. But yet, I have about 4 of Night of the Living Dummy 2 as first editions, but it would have been more common because that book came out when Goosebumps' popularity was, like, it was in 1995, I think, this book. So that was when popularity was well and truly taken up. Yep, 95. So they would have done a hell of a lot more first editions of this book as opposed to the earlier ones.
But yeah, I just actually discovered I have a first edition of Attack of the Jack-o'-lanterns. And a cool thing was I actually just bought this off of a friend. When I opened it up,
oh wow!
Yours still
had stickers. Mine doesn't even have that.
It was like there was 2 versions of this. Like this had both the trading cards or the stickers. Like there was both apparently were in print. Because like the cover says trading cards.
Oh, but yes, the stickers in it. That's insane, man. You know, even these had different prints. So this was the 2003 to 2005 or 6. Can't remember. This was that reprint. They still use the old covers, but had more the Series 2000 font. Even these have a, whether or not they're a first or whatever. Like this one, for instance, is, it's probably so hard to read, but it's oh, sorry, wrong side. It's a 10th print. So even this one is not a first edition of that release. Yet I do have a full set of these in first edition because I bought this box set that came out around the time that they did those books, and yeah, every single book in it was first edition. So I was very excited. But yeah, 30-something copies, 1 first edition, and it looks like that. It's really sad, but at least I can say I have one, even though it's... So this was from the first... This came off the printer in that first run. This was in that first run. Makes me wonder how many of these are actually in good condition that were true first prints.
Yeah.
Because, yeah, it's just one of those things, man. But thank you so much for having me on. I just... Yeah. This is great, you know?
Yeah, awesome to have you. Thank you so much for joining me. It was really an honor to have you on the channel.
Well, we're going to be doing this again, man, for sure. Definitely. Like, I reckon we should do... Well, we got a podcast going now, too, by the way, which is the Goosebumps Crew. So, yeah, that's going to be once a week. But, yeah, we should definitely also do our videos like this, man. Like, each week or something different. Like, I reckon, you know, just pick a topic, man, and I'm happy to do whatever. Easy.
Yeah. So, again, thank you so much for being on the channel, Bjorn. I hope all of you guys watching have a great day, and I just again hope you all enjoyed the video, and make sure to go subscribe to GoosebumpsAussieFan if for some reason you haven't.
Thank you so much, man. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. All right, bye guys.